All right, people, winding down the year, we've got a very, very special bonus episode for you guys. We've got a decent amount of content we've got going up this week. I know we said The Matrix was our last podcast of the year, but we got a few more things. And tonight, I am joined by two experts in this specific field for this director that we're talking about tonight, that being Adam McKay's brand new Netflix satirical take on just everything going on in the world today. That being Don't Look Up. This movie has a massive ensemble cast and a very relevant message. I'm joined by Dustin Mason and Adam Somer. All of that and more. Stay tuned. All right, guys, we're here to talk about a movie that I think, quite frankly, all three of us have been looking forward to tremendously since it was first announced. This is Adam McKay, easily one of our favorite working directors that we have now, doing a movie for Netflix that is continuing in his strand of movies that he's been doing post his departure from comedy and Gary Sanchez. I know they just recently broke up, but I have a feeling he left that quite a while ago. You've got his new movie, Don't Look Up. It premiered on Netflix on Christmas Eve. This is a movie that stars, again, count it off with me, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep, Kate Blanchett, Tyler Perry, Timothy Chalamet, Rob Morgan.
It goes on and on.
It's a long list of people that are in this movie. I'm joined by Dustin and Adam. They've both been on the channel before. You guys know them at this point. But before we got this started, I wanted to go around and I wanted each person to really talk about kind of their relationship with Adam McKay, kind of what he's meant to them as a director, just throughout his long history in Hollywood and the movies that he's made and kind of his transition that he's made to now. I'm going to start with Dustin. What's your history with Adam McKay?
Well, I've always been an Adam McKay fan. I mean, it started with my love of Will Ferrell, and then it just kind of sort of segued into that, where it's just I started to really become a fan of Adam McKay and more aware of who he was through Ricky Bobby. And then I saw Anchorman on on DVD, and then the other guys, and Step Brothers was a big one. I saw that in theaters. I saw all these in theaters too, Step Brothers and other guys and all those. And yeah, I've just loved his progression as a filmmaker. And The Big Short was his first change of pace, and that was about the economic crisis in the late 2000s, and that had another great ensemble cast, and and that was an incredible movie, and it showed a different side of him, and that he's capable of being a more serious quote unquote filmmaker. And then he did Vice, which is divisive, but I do think for what it is, it's a solid biopic, and I think it succeeds more when it's a drama and not trying to be this wink and nod kind of comedy on the side. But I do think he's a very smart individual, and I was a little apprehensive about this movie originally, because I just there was a leaked script out there a couple years ago, and I read the first couple pages of it, and I didn't want to spoil it for myself, the whole thing, so I wasn't going to read it all anyway. But it really wasn't grabbing my attention. But learning about this cast and learning more about the improvisational nature of the movie, and then seeing the trailers, it was definitely making me more confident about the film. But without going into that much, I am a fan of this movie, and I am very disappointed, but not that surprised by the reception that it's gotten.
Absolutely. Yeah. Adam, so what is, again, take it from the top, your relationship with Adam McKay, kind of his movies, and just into your general thoughts on the movie?
Okay. So Adam McKay, for me, again, growing up, I think before I even knew who Adam McKay was, he was influential on me, because before I even knew, more about him, before I did my research, I was like, oh man, Step Brothers is great, like Dustin said, and other guys. And then I started, looking more into what he did, and he was incredibly influential on UCB, I believe, on Upright Citizens Brigade. And for me, that's huge, because I did improv all throughout college, and, I've watched SNL since a really young age. And, we pretty much based our games and how we ran the troupe on the UCB manual. But besides that, Adam McKay is again, like you said, he's a very smart individual who has such he can do both like stupid comedy that has point to it, and then he can do these amazing political and social commentaries that have so much depth and are so incredibly layered as films. And you just got to give him so much credit for that. I mean, the amount of range that he can speak to in his writing, in his directing, honestly, in every single aspect of being a filmmaker. So for me, I this is so shameless. Like 2 years ago, I tweeted at him and he responded and he gave me actually really good advice. He was like, "You can make a movie with a phone now. So tell a story that you think needs to be heard. That's important." And I've taken that to heart. It was again right after we graduated, and we had done one of these, but it was shortly after that. So I've carried those words with me, and I've listened to a lot of other people's advice, but I really think that for me, Adam McKay, it was incredibly influential on me as a writer and filmmaker.
Yeah, pretty much. My whole thing with it is that, so like just a little bit of history on him as well. Adam McKay obviously got his start as a writer on SNL, transitioned there from, he was noticed by Judd Apatow, who pretty much was like the influence on comedy for like the 15 years from like the late 90s to the early 2000s, to pretty much for the entirety of the 2000s to 2010s.
Yeah.
What's it called? He has McKay direct Anchorman, and then it's off to the races from there. In a row, he's got Anchorman, Talladega Nights, Step Brothers, and the other guys all in a row. After that, that's when he starts to deviate a little bit. He does Anchorman 2, obviously, so we can get that money in order to fund The Big Short. And The Big Short was really the first time that I started to notice. I'm like, whoa, because like, I'm not gonna lie, I was familiar with all those comedies, but the problem is I never watched any of them in theaters, because that was just when, like, again, like I went to the theaters like maybe once a year, maybe, because that was when I was a little kid, and I certainly wasn't getting taken to R-rated comedies most of all. So that was the biggest thing for me. So for the majority of my movie watching existence, I didn't know who he was, per se. The thing that really got me to know is Anchorman 2 was the first movie of his that I saw in theaters. And I just thought that was okay, right? Compared to a lot of other really bad comedy sequels to much beloved 2000s comedies we got afterwards, Anchorman 2 just looks better and better as time goes on. But I really started to notice, obviously, when the trailers of The Big Short came out, I'm like, whoa, because I think more than anything else, the style for that just felt so completely new and different. And it shows, because the style of that has gone on to influence like how many things now, like kind of the quick cut documentary feel, like every other take is an improv, kind of cutting off scenes before they end up finishing, but in a way like kind of helping contribute to the story more. Than again, it was so influential. Again, like he directed the pilot for Succession, which is now like the biggest show on the air right now.
Right.
So that should be thing number one there. But I think the biggest thing that I noticed immediately was the fact that, first, his political edge and kind of the direction that he was going, it definitely felt very kind of, screwed the system, essentially, which is, I think, needed when you're trying to do these types of message movies. Because I typically find that whenever they're done from a vantage of kind of within the system, there's always feels like there's something trite. There feels like there's something manipulative there. And I can't really say that I've really gotten that from his movies. Because like if you talk about the two movies that he did in between Anchorman 2 and now The Big Short and Vice, the thing that I noticed with both of those movies is the fact that it's pointing out inherently something that is presented with a little bit of a comedic edge. Vice less so than Big Short, but ultimately just uses the comedy to accentuate like the tragedy. I'll get to that in a bit. He ultimately uses the comedy to accentuate the tragedy of the substance. I think that how that transition to the Don't Look Up, I think works really well, because Don't Look Up to me is the instance where, in my opinion, he succeeded the most, because you had the housing crisis with Big Short, and then you had the Dick Cheney. And then you had about Dick Cheney with Vice. Yeah. And now you've got a movie that was originally conceived as a metaphor for climate change, but I think now is just like such a great encapsulation of just our current socio-political environment and the 24-hour news cycle and the political gamut and everything that's involved there, and obviously big tech's influence. And he ultimately makes a movie that ultimately I would say succeeds so well in its satire that I ultimately found myself just like questioning. I'm like, is this really a comedy? Is it like, obviously it's got funny moments, it's got a typical edge, but like I think that's like the biggest thing for me coming out of this movie is
it's 100%. I mean, every amazing satire does that. I mean, look at Mel Brooks, look at Taika Waititi with Jojo Rabbit. You look at any form of satire and it's speaking truth to power. Adam McKay 100% succeeds here. and the message gets across. It is repeated over and over and over again, the same exact way that for decades now, the experts on these issues have been telling people that are able to make change, hey, we need to do something. You need to do something. And it's just, again, you get these characters who only care about money, or they only care about, fame, and it gets muddy. It's I think this film should be studied by film classes moving forward. I think he did something really incredible here, because it was originally just supposed to be for climate change, which was a genius casting choice with Leonardo DiCaprio, because he's been fighting for that for I don't know how long, but he's doing great things.
Yeah.
And that's another thing to be said. It really touches upon every single just microcosm of what's wrong and what we need to fix moving forward. And it's a really, really good piece.
I guess in the instance of kind of where I'm coming from with that point is the fact that it was one of those instances where the satire worked so well, because often they say like satire at its best is just, again, a mirror of real life. But I guess in the sense that the satire works so well, and especially since we just came off the Trump era, obviously, of the, which obviously it's very clear that elements of this are based on, it just became it just got to a certain point where I was just questioning. I'm like, I know this is supposed to be satire, but like, it doesn't feel like that after a certain point, And I just, ultimately, I definitely was left feeling like really hollow and really just empty at the end of it, even though it had like the ending bit and then the post-credit scene with Jonah, obviously.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Dustin, like, what are some of your thoughts on that?
On what? On like how the movie made me feel?
Yeah, that.
Well, yeah, it made it. I feel like the third act is really what people are responding to and being like, "Oh, this is so depressing and bleak," because that's what we're heading towards if we don't get our heads out of our ass. And I think like the first hour or two, like really perfectly like capture that cynical but still smart edge that it has, and it's hilarious sporadically throughout. Like every scene, I would say, at least has a chuckle worthy moment for the first like hour or so. And just everyone in the cast works perfectly, and they really to me, I was just afraid that this was going to be like the Vice post-credit scene, where it was just, that scene where like the girls are like, "So did you see that they're making a new Fast and Furious movie? I can't wait." I thought that was what this movie was going to be for 2.5 hours, but and some people are actually saying that, but I don't agree, because this could have been a lot more obnoxious. If this movie had like 15 more minutes, or like had like a more significant subplot with Ariana Grande, let's say, then I would be like, yeah, this is obnoxious and like a little too on the nose. But it never felt too on the nose, because it just felt like we needed to hear what, characters like Jennifer Lawrence and Leonardo DiCaprio were saying when they have their meltdowns, their respective meltdowns in this film. So yeah, it just rang true. Yeah, I think it's ringing a little too true for people to really, stomach it. I don't think people like a mirror, to their face. I don't think society likes a mirror to their face. And and it's always the movies like they end up praising like Crash or like some bullshit like that, or like American Beauty, to be like, "Oh, this is the American experience. This is everything." Like, no, it's not. We don't like fantasize about people with rose petals on them. All right, there's a fucking comet coming to Earth, and we're going to die. All right, and Adam McKay knew what he was doing. It reminded me of Network in a good way, and it also reminded me of a smaller film from the 2010s called "Seeking a Friend for the End of the World," starring Steve Carell and Keira Knightley, which also is a very similar but much lower key film.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
No,
I had a follow-up. To me, the interesting thing, the studio that it's made through is a Hyper Object Pictures. And I was actually researching a couple years ago, Morton's theory of hyper objects when we watched Melancholia.
Really?
Lars von Trier. So this actually felt like almost a response or a interpretation of Melancholia in Adam McKay's wheelhouse, which was a little bit, honestly, less depressing than Melancholia. If you want to be depressed and people think this movie's depressing, Melancholia is way
bleak.
more, you know? So to me, I think that's what it felt like. And like you said, it was reminiscent of those other films. It took inspiration from many things. This, I think, is probably his best work so far. I don't know how he's going to top him. I don't know he's going to top himself. I think he's outdid himself with this film.
Well,
I think it has potential, but for now, I think Big Short is right now like his tightest and like most like complete like picture. But this came very close, and I could see myself agreeing with that sentiment in the future.
Yeah, so my whole thing with it is that, so just to break down the plot for anybody who hasn't watched this movie yet, again, it's on Netflix, so I don't know how you wouldn't have. So basically, DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence are scientists at the University of Michigan who discover a comet that's heading directly for Earth. They attempt to warn everyone, of course, besides the fact that, the president has to confirm with them before they ultimately get shuttled off on this massive media tour, and they ultimately just come into conflict with a world that, at the end of the day, just does not want to hear or actually buy into the idea that, okay, this is something simple that needs to be done as far as saving us. This should be a simple cut and dry issue, and no one's treating it as such. Everyone is kind of just going about it, ifs, ands, or buts. They end up coming up with a campaign at the end that says, oh, the comet's not real, and like comet deniers, stuff like that. Again, all stuff that's very, very relevant, and like, again,
incredibly.
Just a few words here and there, and it may as well be like any of one of the political pundits that we've seen here. And I'll admit, going into this movie, I was really worried. Vice, there were a lot of parts of that movie that worked. There are a lot of parts of that movie that didn't work. The constant comedic cutaways. I personally thought that like McKay's kind of like, again, the random cut twos with celebrities and the narration device and the mid-credit scene. It almost felt like he was trying too much to like intersperse the comedy there. And I don't feel
the Shakespeare scene.
Exactly. I don't feel like it worked as well ultimately. And this movie,
wait, hold on. Which Shakespeare scene?
When they're in the bed and like they're talking about like him like deciding like, I'm going to become vice president, but he's telling his wife in a very Shakespeare. I think they're doing Hamlet.
They're literally quoting Hamlet.
Yeah, they're doing
it's Hamlet. Yeah. It's awful.
I thought it was funny.
There was supposed to be a musical number in that scene.
Oh,
that they cut out.
right. I do remember that.
You can find that online.
Really?
Yeah.
There
was a musical number they cut because it was that ridiculous that the test screenings were even like fucking chill.
Would you consider this an absurdist comedy, Dustin?
This
absurdist
not as much as like Idiocracy. And I've seen people be like, this is a shittier Idiocracy. Like, no, Idiocracy was just a little too on the nose for me, and like just really just hammered that point of like, people are retarded in the future. And it's like, this movie had realistic characters, it had the people that would believe them in the beginning and then became skeptical but believably, and then it had like those, like Dominic was saying, those people that were protesting near the end and threw shit at Jonah Hill. Like those people exist. And it wasn't that like exaggerated. If it was a little too exaggerated, then it would have been like, I would have considered it absurdist and maybe not good.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like the satire was just on the head enough where it didn't like ring false. Because if it rang false, I don't think the movie would have worked.
And that's exactly where I'm trying to go there, because again, like and I talked about this with Dustin when all the trailers were coming out. I was not a fan of these trailers. I was not. I thought the movie was going to be too absurdist for its own good. I thought all the characters were going to be really on the nose. I wasn't sure if because I had an idea of how weighty this was going to be just based on his previous movies, but I didn't realize just how weighty it was going to be. And I'm not going to lie, I was worried. I was very, very worried that he wasn't going to be able to pull off this weighty of a message. And needless to say, I was very sorely mistaken because he fucking pulled it off. He really, really did. Like again, like I said, it was so scarily accurate to real life as far as how the satire worked that I really thought that after a certain point, and that movie hasn't done this for me in a while, where I really thought that after a while I wasn't watching a movie. I thought I was just watching like one of the endless 24-hour like news cycles that we watched just like during the last couple of years of the Trump presidency or anything like that after a certain point. And I guess if anything, like he should be commended for that. But I also, at the same time, am like, okay, where exactly, like what exactly is, I get where the message is coming from. And it's obvious he's pulling a lot of influences and aspirations to like not only movies like Network, but also Doctor Strangelove. And it's interesting because we haven't gotten a movie quite like this in a while. And so I guess the biggest thing for me is because we all love the movie. The movie's great. I guess the biggest thing for me is trying to figure out like with the critical divisiveness of it, right? Because the whole thing is that this movie has already been getting like a ton of critical division as the last couple really of McKay's movies have gotten since The Big Short came out. And I'm just wondering, like, is this just a thing of where it's like people just don't, like Dustin said, that people just don't like having a mirror showing up in their faces? Because it's one of those things where, and I don't think I've seen this in a while with this kind of a movie, where inside the film circles and like the critics, it's been divisive to not well received at all. But pretty much everyone that I hear that talks about this outside of those circles, they love it. They love it, and they say it's completely accurate to real life. It's completely satirical in like the best way possible, and it's one of those message movies where it's like, again, people need to hear this and understand this in some capacity. The problem just being that, again, if this movie proved anything, it's that we're so absorbed kind of in our own individual little bubbles, or just don't have the ability to actually do anything about it. That will there be able to be anything done by the time it's too late? But I don't know. What's your guys' takes on that?
I think that's honestly part of the point of the film. I mean, the pacing of it is very quick and fast. It doesn't feel, I think at times it can drag a little bit, but for the most part, it is very quick to get to the point, and it keeps hitting that nail on the head consistently, because no matter how hard everyone's been trying, somehow the message keeps going over people's heads that need to hear it. And people they don't want to hear negative shit. They just, people want to enjoy just doing, so it's understandable that people wouldn't want to receive a movie like this in that capacity, because people are like, every time someone gets up on stage at the Academy and makes a political speech, everyone's like, oh my God, just take the award and go. You're already rich and famous, and you made a really cool movie. Like, what more do you want? It's like, well, it's like, I'm trying to use my voice as a platform to raise awareness. So
if I can only raise one caveat to that, which is that, and I do see where you're coming from, Adam, but I guess the instance for that, I feel like from more like from a lot of people is a sense, not necessarily with the whole them just taking the award and just taking up screen time, but more so just the fact that they usually talk about things that they're usually not qualified to talk about. So that's the instance where I'm like, okay, I sort of see where they're coming from with that.
So you think that oftentimes there are celebrities that aren't qualified to speak on a certain subject?
Absolutely. They're not qualified. They don't have the qualifications to actually understand. And most of the time it's only done as a pundit thing that's recommended by like their publicist or their
but even if they're not 100% informed, do you think the words don't hold some merit or importance?
I don't think they do when it comes from a place of what's the word I'm looking for?
Self-service,
self-service or self-indulgence. That's
good publicity. Do you think it's a publicity driven?
Yes, that's what it is. The fact that and the problem is that so much of the time it is, so that when it actually does come from a place of genuine, it's like they're so few and far between that it's like,
Yeah, no, I respect that. I think that's a really good point. I would say that for this film, at least, it should get lots of nominations. If it doesn't get original screenplay, I would be very surprised.
For real.
Yeah, they're going to give Paul Thomas Anderson Licorice Pizza.
I don't know.
For grooming.
I don't know.
The movie.
I'm still going to fight you on that. I'm still not saying it was grooming, but I definitely see where you're coming from. Where
it wasn't specifically that, but like, you know what I mean.
I'm seeing that tomorrow. So
Adam, put this in perspective. The fact that Licorice Pizza would possibly get Paul Thomas Anderson his first ever Oscar win for screenplay when he lost for Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, and Magnolia, and Magnolia and The Master. It's like,
so wait, he was nominated for all of those, and then he didn't get them.
Not The Master. His screenplay noms have been Boogie Nights, Magnolia, There Will Be Blood, and Inherent Vice. Those have been his screenplay nominations.
There Will Be Blood is his, I think.
But you remember what he was up against that year, right?
No Country
for Old Men.
And they were both in Adapted.
Yeah.
And No Country swept that year.
Coen Brothers, they don't have anything running this year, right?
Yeah,
they got Tragedy of Macbeth.
What is it? Oh my God!
You know what's crazy? What's crazy? I'm so happy that you brought that up. So this is a repeat year for two different instances. You got Coen's versus PTA again for Tragedy of Macbeth and Licorice Pizza, although it's only one Coen this time. And then you got Spielberg and Campion going head to head again, which I told you about on the Power of the Dog podcast with West Side Story and Power of the Dog.
We have the Oscar race this year is
insane.
It is. I mean, talk about a sprint
Also,
Yeah.
this finally being
And
the
this should
first
be
year-
winning Best Picture, and this is like annoying me. Like,
Also, the fact that this is finally going to be the year that we supposedly get 10 nominations for the first time since 2011, but
10 nominations
for Best Picture.
Whoa! Wait, what? I thought a couple years
Not
ago.
Since 2011. Not since 2011 have we gotten 10 Best Picture nominees.
I thought they
which
changed
is
it in 2019.
Yeah, they did. They did. So they changed it in 2020 for this year. This will be the first year that it does it.
Oh,
because last year, the last couple of years, every year since 2011, which is the year that King's Speech won Best Picture over Social Network, it's been between 9 and 8. It was 9 for 3 years in a row. Then it was 8 for what's it called? It was 8 for 2018, and I think 2014, 2018, and 2020. There were only 8 nominations each, and every other year it was 9.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think No Way Home is going to get a Best Picture spot?
Definitely
Even
not.
though
I know Tom Holland's campaigning hard, and that's a lot of big publicity, but no, the Oscars hate Marvel. They will never ever nominate a Marvel movie.
I don't think the Oscars
unless it's Black Panther.
Unless it's Black Panther with the political messaging.
I don't think they hate Marvel. I just think that it's still in that stage of being taken as serious cinema because obviously, Scorsese and all that. And
well, just also because of the stage of cinema and what we're at in general. I mean, to me, let's be completely frank. The Oscars are going to be phased out, are going to be either their own streaming service or just going to be like a private award ceremony that maybe a few industry insiders tune into in a couple years at a certain point. Because and this is something that Dustin and I have talked about as well, which is the idea that just the movies that the Academy rewards are not the movies that people watched, which again, people will forget this, but back in the day, the movies that were nominated for Oscars, people watched and people loved, which does not happen anymore. Again, whenever I tell people these movies were nominated for Best Picture, and they're like, "What are those movies?" I've never even heard of them, let alone.
I've heard no one talk about Nomadland this year.
Yeah. I wasn't hearing people talk about Nomadland last year, but in fairness, again, we always have to take 2020 with a caveat because that was the COVID year. But in fairness, yes, exactly. No one was talking about Nomadland. No one was talking about Promising Young Woman, which was great. No one was talking about, again, I'm struggling.
But she won for that.
She won screenplay, and but she did not win actress because she lost to Frances McDormand.
Right.
But but this
Emerald Fennell should have won director.
Right. But
she was nominated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was famously again. It's funny. I was actually having a conversation with this Emerald Fennell and Chloe Zhao, both getting nominated last year, officially boosted the amount of women that have been nominated for Best Director from 5 up to 7. But in an interesting twist of fate, I think that does tie in back with this movie really interesting. Well, because famously, the only other thing that I think the Oscars hate more than than superhero movies and Marvel is Netflix, because as we know, every year there's always those 1 or 2 Netflix movies that get 11 nominations and no wins. The only win famously in 2019, again, Mank only won cinematography last year, and then Laura Dern won supporting for Marriage Story. That was it. No other Netflix movie has really gotten any major wins as far as that caliber. But I find it interesting with this movie in particular, where again, it went to Netflix on Christmas. So that means that again, because everybody has Netflix, a lot of people are going to end up watching this, which is insane to me, because besides the fact that it's okay, this is the one instance where almost all the traditionalist movie aspects would work, right? It's got the big ensemble cast, it's got the big name director, it's got the big name lead stars. Leo DiCaprio is one of the few people that people do still recognize and would still churn out for in a way that very, very few movie stars can still really do. And and if this does get a lot of Oscar nominations, this could be the thing that actually gets people to tune in, because I mean, besides the fact that just because of what a weird year this has been, just because of the return to normalcy with COVID, again, you're also going to have movies like Dune, which a lot of people watch as well, get nominated in addition to all of the other movies that maybe 5 people will watch. I'm sorry, I don't know how many people actually watch Belfast. I don't know how many people. Licorice Pizza is getting a decent amount of promo, but I really don't know how many people are going to end up watching that. Same with West Side Story. West Side Story famously bombed hard, even though that's again based off of a thing that people should already recognize. But this would be an interesting case where, even though yes, the Academy itself might look down on this, which I don't know why, because for the most part, the Academy has really been really warm and receptive towards McKay. So I'm not quite sure why people thought that this was going to be the one that kind of, at least, prior to watching it, whether this was going to be the one that finally oh no, people started to ignore. Because it's for all that I understood, this could arguably be if the Oscar movie that gets the most publicity. So I definitely find that kind of really interesting, because again, you open up Netflix on Christmas Eve, it's the first thing that opens up. Hey, all these stars, Don't Look Up. Boom.
I still think it could possibly pull like an Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, where it's like they also like Stephen Daldry, like when like they nominated him for everything. So it's like, and they've nominated Adam McKay for like both of his movies for the last 2 times he's made a movie. So like I wouldn't keep this out, and enough people have been liking this. Like the people that really like it really do dig it.
I think it was a smart decision on McKay's part to have it be on Netflix, because we are in a very strange time where going to the movie theater is a touchy subject.
Right.
You know, like, because it's like, some people
don't know
afraid.
whether to go because of the whole COVID thing.
Some people are afraid. Some people feel more comfortable because some places are asking for proof of vaccination. Other people don't want any part of it. We are in a very interesting time for cinema because of just how hard it's been for theaters to make money in the past year. And now, with things seeming a little more normal, we're seeing a bit more return to the theaters. Although, you know, it's a very odd situation to call. But I think that it was a good and smart decision to have it on Netflix, as well as a limited. Is it a limited theater run, or is it a full?
Yeah, limited theater run, because the Netflix movie, they always have to have the limited theater run.
It needs 2 weeks at least. 2 weeks in theaters at least. So I think that was a really smart thing, because now everyone has the time at home to watch it. And maybe, you know, then, like you said, it's good for spreading the word. People are going to really continue to talk about it. And, you know, because it's gonna raise lots of controversial discussions and opinions, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the other thing too, also with this movie, is the fact that what's it called? Is the fact that I think the tone here that he nails is arguably might be his best one yet. Because what I will say about The Big Short, and I do love The Big Short. I love that movie to death. Like, that is still one of my favorite movies of the last decade. One of my favorite movies of 2015, which is like one of my favorite years ever. Is that even in that movie, the tonality that is taken just with all the different storylines that are following, like the different styles of acting, and because that really was his first major instance in that type of pursuing that type of a story and that type of a structure with the different improvisational nature that he took, there's a little bit of, I think, of a disconnect between like kind of the different styles of acting, and the point really isn't hammered home, I feel, until like the end. But with this movie, I think that, like, again, all of the different like kind of political pundits that you're following and all the different types. Like, again, I kept waiting for the moment where I'm like, okay, when is this going to become too silly? When is this going to become too over the top? And it never does. And like, this is a 2.5 hour long movie. I got to check, but I think this might be his longest movie that he's done yet. And
seems like it.
Yeah. And like,
or Vice might be about the same.
I got to check. I don't remember how long Vice was off the top of my head, but the fact that he nails the tone so hard, and the fact that it's like every single instance, like literally, I'm not kidding when I say that, like, a lot of the jokes in this movie flew over my head, pun intended, because like I was just so focused on the subject matter and so like inherently sucked in by, whoa, okay, so this is finally somebody shining up the mirror to us the last couple of years and making us like realize and understand just how truly screwed we are as a people. And if we're talking
if we don't work together, if we don't do something to make active change, and that's the biggest thing take away from it. I think some people are going to find this movie disturbing. I find it in a way incredibly
cathartic.
And necessary.
Yeah. Because sure, people, again, they're not going to want to watch something that heavy, but I think with the comedy it brings levity to it. I
think it's kind of a double-edged sword too, putting it on Netflix. Well, yeah, it's a cool like marketing strategy, but then like the everyday normal like movie watcher, they're gonna see this movie like Leonardo DiCaprio and Katniss Everdeen. Oh my god! And then they start watching, and it's like the world's gonna end, and it's like, okay, it's not for those kind of people, but like people that want to pay attention to what this movie is talking about, they will, and they'll enjoy it. I guarantee it. Dos Equis.
Absolutely, yeah. So before we get out of here, we'll talk about the cast, because like I said,
absolutely,
Adam McKay has worked with some pretty big cast before, but I think there's an argument to be made this might be his biggest cast yet. Like this again, like I just listed off like,
Yeah.
like how many people in this movie have
So
won
many.
Oscars? Like,
okay, so let's actually try and list out everyone. Okay, so we got Leo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence,
Jonah
Hill, Meryl Streep,
Rob Morgan,
Tyler
Perry, Kate Blanchett,
Ron Perlman,
the guy from Bridge of Spies who plays
Mark
Rylance.
Yeah,
best performance of the movie to me.
It's so funny.
Performance
so funny.
Argument to be made.
It's the scariest performance.
So
it's so funny. He's just this insane Steve Jobs-esque character.
You go Jobs. For me, the whole time I was thinking of like, okay, he's some weird mix between Zuckerberg, Musk, and Bezos.
Yeah, and a little bit of Joe Biden. A little bit of Joe Biden.
He's
the way he's sniffing the hair.
Giant.
Yeah.
He's a tech giant.
Yeah.
He's obviously, he's a corporate media, whatever. Who else? Let's see.
Elon. You say Elon, right?
Yeah. Who else was in this that we can?
Oh my God! Well, Himesh Patel.
There's so many.
Who's been popping up in the last couple of years.
Matthew Perry has a credit, I think.
Yeah, but he's not in it. And I was
cut out.
I was really mad about that. I was wondering where Michael Chiklis is in this.
Yeah.
From The Shield. Who else? Oh, Kid Cudi and Ariana Grande.
Kid Cudi.
Timothy
Chalamet. Who's he's like this like anarchist type kid,
religious guy.
Who's also religious.
Yeah.
The point being is there's a lot of people.
There's so many people.
There's a lot of people in this movie, and again, like it's become a very large gimmick. The fact like having the big ensemble cast with all the movie stars, and usually it winds up being something like. And as much as I did love this, it ends up becoming something like French Dispatch, where you just have one person pop in for like one scene and then they leave. But the fact that we actually got like this cast like kind of all working in synergy with each other and all kind of like bouncing off each other, and the fact that again these are. I feel like with the exception of Jonah, largely not a comedic cast at all. And the fact that they're all able to improvise and riff off each other so well. And the funniest part is that McKay, in an interview that I was listening to earlier today, even said that apparently the best improviser on set was Meryl, which I'm like, okay, that's weird to think about. It's weird to hear, but then in hindsight, you think about it, it's like, okay, she's been this big for how long now? That kind of does make sense. But I think the most impressive thing is the fact that, again, like this movie is penned as a comedy, but none of them are like, acting comedically, really, if that makes any sense. Like, do
you mean to say that none of them feel like caricatures?
Yeah.
None of them feel like caricatures.
I don't know.
Good.
I think some of them feel like obvious caricatures of specific people in the realm of
but I guess in the
but realistic enough. Like it wasn't like cartoony.
Right. And I guess in the sense that it doesn't feel like it's making fun of them per se. And I feel like that's usually the biggest difference between parody and satire, and that's and again, there are terms that a lot of people get confused all the time. Parodies, which are usually a lot more on the nose, usually a lot more obvious, and usually a lot more leaning towards comedic, versus satire, usually not as obvious, usually a lot more subtle, and usually kind of like closer to the belt as far as what exact like specific genre is this?
It's more of like the sarcastic cynicism of The Big Short and
Succession.
And Succession and parts of Vice, where there are parts like that are kind of like smart ass, sort of cynical. That it's not like his bombastic brand of comedy that he was known for in the early 2000s. Like this is his like newer kind of style of humor, but it's definitely a style of humor, inarguably. Like it's dry at points, it's definitely in your face at points, but it's not like a Jim Carrey movie. It's not like Jim Carrey spreading his ass going like, and I love that as much as the next guy, but that's a completely different type of comedy. And that's why I think it's more like Network and like the more ridiculous kind of nature of Network, even though that's mostly a serious movie.
Is that Peter Capaldi?
What?
Peter
Finch.
Network.
Peter Finch. Who directed Network?
Sidney Lumet.
Right. Yeah. I haven't watched that movie in a while. We watched it in high school, in my high school film class. So yeah, I mean, I need to kind of revisit that after this, because it was, like you said earlier, I think it kind of reminded me of that a bit too.
Well, just in the sense of like the social satire elements that are like really, really strikingly relevant. The thing about Network is that movie came out in 1976 and it's still relevant now.
This is more like in terms of like satire. This is more of like a Doctor Strangelove satire than a Network kind of satire. Even though it has elements of Network, like the blow up moment with Leo and the Melanie Linsky confrontation cheating scene, which is kind of ripped from Network. But at the same time, like it's not as bad as like how the Joker kind of steals from King of Comedy at points, literally. Even though I do love that movie too.
Joker is again an homage to Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, tons of other character study films, which again we could do a separate episode on Paul Schrader if we wanted to, but and Scorsese, but you know, I don't think it was ripping off. I think it was again taking inspiration in regards to Don't Look Up and those other films, and same with Joker, but that was again a pretty divisive movie.
The thing with Joker that I find is that I think the difference being with all those other movies in Joker is that all of those other movies are not necessarily paying homage for the sake of paying homage. They're doing it because they want to use that to accentuate their own subject matter. And Joker to me felt like it was only paying homage just to pay homage and be like, hey, remember how cool King of Comedy and Taxi Driver was? Here's it, but with a superhero movie. And those are the elements for me, the Joker, that didn't really work as well. But before we wrap up, I think that you guys do bring it into a good, interesting point, which is that McKay was talking also on this interview that I was listening to earlier today about kind of the shape of comedy and where it's going per se. And obviously we know comedy has been just under, again, cancel culture. Comedy has been like the biggest victim of that. I would say just all the different stand-up specials, all the different stand-up comedians that have come under scrutiny in the last couple of years.
I don't know. Do you really think? I honestly,
let me finish. Let me go where I'm going with this. So, and I feel like that's been the biggest example of that in movies as well. And it works in weird tandem with the fact that pretty much almost every single straight quote unquote comedy, right, has surpassed theaters and gone straight to streaming now because the people don't go out to theaters to watch comedies anymore, you know? Now, part of that obviously is just the nature of the filmmaking piece in general and the fact that people really only go out theaters to watch like really one kind of movie now. But I did bring up one interesting point that I did want to bring up to you guys, which is, do you think that this movie is kind of a significant direction as to where comedy is going? And do you think we're going to get more quote unquote comedies like this as opposed to like more straight up bare bone comedy?
Probably not.
I hope we do. I mean, I love slapstick and just silly, stupid comedies like, you know, Austin Powers and all that. I hope we see more comedies like this because, you know, comedy has always been an outlet to speak truth to power and to make people laugh. And you know, look at Carlin, look at Bo Burnham, look at any amazing comedian in the past, you know, just at all. But I do want to go back to what you said about cancel culture. To me, cancel culture isn't as prevalent as we think it is. I mean, every week there's someone who says something stupid. And then the next week, someone else says something stupid or does something stupid, and that's being talked about. So when you think about people who have been canceled, which I don't even like using that word, people that have been canceled continuously get work and find a way to continue using their voice in some way. There are very rare occasions that people are canceled and they are never working again. I mean, it happens, but it's very rare that people are canceled and they never work again. They never do anything because people change and people are capable of moving past saying stupid things that might have offended people. You know, what kind of society or world are we living in where someone's going to be, look at Kevin Hart. He couldn't host the Oscars because of a tweet from, what was it, 12 years ago?
Yeah.
Something like that.
And he has moved past that clearly because he's immensely successful.
Yeah.
So I really, the idea of cancel culture is, I think it is real, but not as, it's just really, I don't think it
you think it's overhyped as far as how much of a problem people make it seem versus how much of a problem it actually is. Okay, Dustin, what's your take on that?
I think people are like overly reactionary. I think that's inarguable. Now, if anything, like I think, you know, they put too much stock into these celebrities, and then they just act so disappointed at them over a joke or like over something stupid. You know, and you say like Kevin Hart, yeah, he has a bunch of money and he has a bunch of like, and thank God he didn't do anything else but the gay jokes, because if it was anything worse than the gay jokes, he would not have a career. But backing your point up, yeah, he couldn't host the Oscars, but if they asked him again, you know, like they'll bring the internet will bring that up again. And Kevin Hart even said that just recently in an interview with Seth Rogen, who was like balking at the fact that there's no cancel culture at all, which cancel culture exists for just regular society people too, not just celebrities.
Right.
But you know, I still think like, and they're the Kevin Hart thing with the hosting the Oscars. Like, no one has hosted anything since. Who was the last host for some Cedric the Entertainer for the Emmys?
Well,
they did something.
They did what was it? They did alternating co-hosts last year, or they had a bunch of people come on and introduce
for the
others.
Oscars.
Yeah,
but they do that every year as far as having people.
I honestly think that's better. I think that it's really cool to have like specific tailored bits of
I mean, if you ask me, none of the hosts since Chris Rock have been worth even talking about, because you had Kimmel twice in a row and he was boring, and then
it all depends on who. It all depends. And when we were about to get a great host, then this shit happens. So it's just like we were going to get another great stand-up, and then
who was going to host?
Kevin Hart.
Oh, he was supposed to host again.
Kevin Hart. No, Kevin Hart was supposed to host, and then we are where we are now.
Right.
I mean, but like, yeah, Chris. It just all depends on who you host. And Ricky Gervais, when he does the Golden Globes, it's outstanding.
Yeah.
And it's like. Why? How can you complain about that? Why would you rather have just a bunch of people, or why would you want just Sandra Oh and Andy Samberg to host when you can have like an actual great comedian?
I think Andy Samberg and Sandra Oh are fantastic.
Not in their hosting job.
Not in the hosting.
Not in the hosting job that they did. That was.
Who doesn't like Andy Samberg?
Dude,
I love Andy Samberg.
I love Andy Samberg,
but
his hosting gigs and like his roast gigs have not been good.
No, the roast gig was great. You'd have no idea what's good. Then the fucking then he hosted the Independent Spirit Awards, which was awesome, and the MTV Movie Awards. Like, he's awesome. He can be really fucking funny. Andy Samberg.
His bit on the James Franco roast was not good.
That's a hot take.
Not
I haven't watched that in so long.
Because you know what? I was laughing at every single one of during that roast. Then Bill Hader goes up with the Hollywood thing, and I'm like, okay, this is okay. And then Andy Samberg.
That was great.
What is happening?
Oh my God. All right. But like going back to the cast, I want to highlight this cast more. Like Leonardo DiCaprio, he's always great against type, especially when he's in a more comedic role, and he knocks it out of the park here. And by the way, I'm so glad Jennifer Lawrence is back. I fucking missed her. She's so talented and just has such a very distinct energy, and just
what was the last thing? Talented. What was the last thing we saw her in?
Probably like Troy.
Red Sparrow.
Oh, Red Sparrow. That's right. Red Sparrow.
But no, she was in Mother,
which was before Red Sparrow.
Yeah,
but that was the last. Okay, but then before that, was it Hunger Games and all that?
No, it would have been
X-Men. No, what
X-Men.
about
X-Men? X-Men.
Dark Phoenix. That's right.
Also,
now we're just listing all of her movies.
Yeah,
Dark Phoenix was
but she was great in this movie.
X-Men Dark Phoenix, I'm pretty sure, was the most recent thing she was in. She wasn't in anything that came out in 2020.
And I just think she really, more than most people, if not everybody, just had like a great grasp on Adam McKay's like style of dialogue, and just the way she delivered it was just perfect. Like Holly Hunter in broadcast news, almost like just like she was that natural. And then Rob Morgan is like their kind of like scientist partner in all of this, and he does a lot of the behind the scenes dealings, and I thought he was like blissfully dry in this. Like I thought he was terrific, especially the scene where he's getting arrested and he just starts saying like, just be cool. My skin is darker because your ancestors went to Northern Europe. Love and that's fucking great. And then Jonah Hill just steals it with that great Don Jr. kind of send up where he's sort of sexualizing his mother, the president, played by Meryl Streep, who's devilishly funny in this, and like really surprised me in this, and how great and how much she handled that character.
There were direct parallels. If you want to talk about even just the name and the at the end when they're chanting and then they look up and they see the comet is heading towards them, they're like, they lied to us, and they start throwing the bottles at them.
Amazing. I love
and then I think it's so funny that she leaves him behind. She leaves her own son behind, and he's on the phone, he's like, have fun with Jason. And then she realizes, I just abandoned
That
my son.
made me laugh hard, like
That
hard.
like, she forgets her own son.
Yeah.
I mean, the characters were all so well rounded and developed. I could this whole film, I could write a paper on, like, a full, like, a dissertation on just how amazing it was. But it is really funny to see the direct parallels between things just kind of hitting you over the head with it, which Adam McKay likes to do. Again, Vice and Big Short and etc. So yeah, that was my comment, my little tangent there.
And Mark
Absolutely.
Rylance, like we were saying, like he steals the movie whenever he's in it and is like genuinely creepy. And I love the score by Nicholas Patel
Yes.
too, is like outstanding. And like I love that scene when he's explaining about like the comet and like all like the diamonds and minerals that are going to be on the comet. And you can hear like that score is swelling up, like with that violin. It's like,
Yeah.
and then it just cuts. I just fucking love that.
Yeah,
And
I definitely gotta give credit to Patel here, because like it's funny, because in a year that, like, I would say I had some pretty interesting scores already to begin with, and the fact that this one comes in, it's got like his usual, like, his usual like, kind of grand orchestral sense, but it's also like almost got this like kind of upbeat, like kind of jumpy, like happy nature to it, but then it like has these moments of like underlying cynicism to it that it draws.
I'm not gonna lie,
impressed by it.
The opening credits kind of reminded me of Monsters Inc. I don't
kind of
like with that jazzy score,
I'm
and how
glad
like
I was the only one that thought that.
like how like the names would overlap on each other. Like I just thought like it was just very like
the design,
Monsters
like with
Inc.
the doors.
And it was all multicolored and everything too. I love
Yeah.
that. I really love like this movie. It's great.
Yes, absolutely. So with that being said, people, bringing it into final thoughts and star ratings. Dustin, we started with you. So Adam, you go first. Final thoughts and star ratings.
I have to give it a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
I really do. I wouldn't. I mean, if I could rate it above that, I would. On my Twitter, I normally rate things above what they are if I really, really enjoy them. This obviously deserves a 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, and way beyond that. It's fantastic.
Awesome.
Did you love Vice?
Yeah, Vice was fan. I thought Bale should have gotten the Oscar that year, because he put on so much weight. He shaved his head. He the cadence
sounded just like him. Yeah,
I mean, that movie in itself is overlooked and underrated. I don't think it gets enough credit.
Yeah, I definitely like that more than most people. I did.
The irony being that Bale, who did almost a spot-on impression of Dick Cheney, lost to Rami Malek, who half the time had to be dubbed with Freddie Mercury's singing.
I'm not sure how much of his vocals were.
But like there was a decent amount. There was a decent amount that you could tell.
It's like, am I going to see a TikTok as a movie? You know what I mean?
No, you're just seeing a shitty biopic. Bradley Cooper should have won that year.
Yeah.
I think this movie.
Born.
Yes, he's incredible.
Final thoughts and star ratings.
He was. Yes, he was really
Don't
good
Look Up gets a 4.5 out of 5, 9.5 out of 10. I think it's outstanding, and I think it's a great satire on our times, and I think it's not as bleak as it could have been, not as cynical as it could have been, and not as obnoxious as it could have been. And for that, I thank Adam McKay and his masterful tone and his masterful direction, his masterful casting. Whoever did the casting in this movie is terrific. Ariana Grande was pretty much my only problem with this movie, because I felt like she's a shitty actress. And but other than that, and Kid Cudi wasn't that good in this either. Yeah, I just think this is a terrific film, and I could totally see myself bumping it to a 10 eventually when I get less annoyed by that stuff that I'm not a fan of. But I wouldn't have minded a longer cut personally. I would have liked more of Matthew Perry, a little bit more fleshing out of Jennifer Lawrence, maybe with her parents, because that's the only scene we see with her parents is like when she goes home and they don't let her in the house. So it's like I would have liked a little bit more with her, a little bit more with Timothy Chalamet, who comes in the third act and kind of steals the entire movie.
I want to jump off of what you just said there. I think even that scene, it was short enough, but it establishes, again, another very perfect commentary on issues of people that have been educated and they go home to the, family that they grew up in a different time. And so they have different political views and they don't quite understand the gravity of certain situations.
Yeah,
So
and the
establishes that
yeah,
like in an instant. They're like,
yeah.
we're for everything this guy wants to do with the drilling into the asteroid for minerals.
Yes.
100%. I agree with both of you guys. This is one of my favorite for a movie that I had very low expectations for going on. This is easily one of my favorites of the year. McKay hits it out of the park again. 4.5 out of 5 stars from me. Literally, like I really don't understand why people are like acting like he's not talented at all, because he is, and every single really thing that he touches just works in general. And for this movie to be as mostly for this movie to be as biting as it was, for this movie to be as sharp as it was, for this movie to be as prescient as it was, without ever feeling like kind of like it was hitting you too hard over the head, this was really honestly the movie that we needed, honestly, after the year of 2021. So yeah, 4.5 out of 5 stars for me easily. And it's funny, Adam, that you mentioned that you were wondering what he's doing next, because as of right now, I don't know whether he is still doing this, but as of right now, his next film that he has set to direct is a movie called Bad Blood, which will star Jennifer Lawrence playing Elizabeth Holmes.
Taylor Swift.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, as Elizabeth Holmes, who is what's it called? Let me just find the specifics here. That doesn't tell me who it is, but she's the woman who came up with like that what's it called, the blood scandal thing. I don't remember the specifics of it, but anybody who,
that's all we know about it, is that it's bad blood.
Yes, exactly. I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple people that showed up in the chat. Jay, thank you for showing up. What's it called? Pete, good to see you again. It hasn't been there in a minute. Yes, it is a satirically dark comedy. And Eric, saying yes, he hasn't checked out the film, but he plans to, mainly for Leo. What's it called? He's not really into politics, so Adam McKay's don't do it much for him. And Jay saying the only people who hate it are the ones who didn't get it or were offended, or both.
Exactly.
And I'll add one more thing to that. The people who hated it are the people who thought that it reminded them too much of themselves but won't admit it. I'll throw that in there as well, 100%, because I find that to be the case with a lot of the people who did not like this movie. So with that being said, that was it. That was our review of Don't Look Up. Again, keep tuning in for this week. We've got a couple more things that we're dropping before the end of the year. Chris and I are going live tomorrow night for our Book of Boba Fett premiere recap, which we will be doing for the next couple weeks until that show goes on. Guys, thank you so much again for tuning in. And thank you two so much for joining me on this. Adam, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
You guys can find me at MRARS97 on Twitter, or at Adam_Somer_films on Instagram. I don't really, I've been trying to get better at posting more. I use Twitter much more so. So that's where you can find me. Dom, thank you for having me on again. This is always so much fun.
Of course, man. Definitely. Again, I hope to have you on for many more. Dustin, where can the good people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me on youtube.com/Mr. G Movie Reviews. You can find me on Letterboxd, Dustin Mason. You can find me on Twitter, Duster.
Of course,
awesome.
you can of course follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram. But more importantly, be sure to click the subscribe button down below. Click the bell next to it. That way you guys get notified every time we put up new content. Guys, we're only 2 subscribers away from 400 subscribers. Two subscribers away. Let's try and get us to that 400 so that we can have our 400 subscribers live stream that we have every single time. So please click the subscribe button. And be sure to follow our official social media pages at official Talkin TV Podcast on Facebook and Instagram down below. And as always, people, remember, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. See you guys next time.